Hello, you're listening to Jump and Shoot, a gaming podcast. Today is Thursday, January 21st, 2021. And this is Jump and Shoot's Sidequests, a series of more quickfire discussion-based podcasts, quote unquote, and where I talk with a member of the community or just anybody who wants to talk about video games, and we just sit down, we talk for an hour, we don't make any plans, we just do the thing. And today I'm joined by Rio, a content creator.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on here and bullshitting with me.
You're welcome. I am always good for talking about video games. I mean, as you might guess.
Well, somebody has to be, because I hate video games, and I only do this for the money.
That's disappointing.
It is.
Is there a lot of money?
Oh,
is there a lot of money in that? I'm thinking about a career change, so.
I make millions of dollars sitting here and releasing one episode a year. So
you're that person. You're that person from all those ads that I make $80,000 a day from sitting on my computer.
And just like those ads, it's a 100% bullshit. So hell yeah. But Rio, what are we talking about today, man? What is the subject?
We're talking about Octopath Traveler. We wanted to just keep with the Square-Enix theme here going.
Always. That is my theme. Octopath Traveler. This is a very loaded subject for a lot of folks. I feel like this game's critical opinion is very divisive. I know a lot of people who loved it, a lot of people who hated it. So it's hard to say.
I think that's part of the reason I kind of wanted to talk about it, because I really do like it. I like it a lot, and that's just not what I see a lot of the time on social media. I hear people complaining about it and saying it's not good, or the biggest insult, it's mid.
And is that
and,
so? That's a bigger insult to you? You think that?
It's the biggest insult. Absolutely. Calling a game mid, it's worse than calling it trash.
I made a tweet a couple days ago that I think that the Tales of series is pretty mid. So I hope that doesn't.
Gasp! I'm pretty sure you're going to insult all my viewers, because my Tales of videos do really well. People really like Tales in my community, so
I'll check them out. So I don't dislike the series at all. I actually like it. I just think that at a general average, the games just feel a little mid. I've never disliked a Tales game, at least, so that's to me, that's pretty good.
I'd say that's pretty good, but yeah, I mean, I am definitely no Tales of expert. I played 2 games in the series, but anyways, Octopath Traveler.
Yeah, and real quick, I just wanted to, I guess I forgot to mention this, because this is a live stream. We do field any questions here. So if any of the viewers have any questions, please ask, and I will answer them as soon as I can.
Bring them on.
Yes. And the first question that may be asked is, why is CommRio here a little shield and not a person?
So for my channel, and this is something I generally keep for pretty much my whole internet presence, is that I don't use my real name. I don't use face cam and all that, and that's partially because I want to focus on the games rather than me.
That's awesome.
I do think I have a personality, and hopefully that helps with these things, but I want the focus to be on the games, and I also kind of like not having to worry about things coming back to I don't know, my job or personal life in there, or just being able to control that. So yes, that is
Totally.
why I am the shield that I created like 3 years ago to start the channel that has kept up
It is
for
a
all that
shield of
time.
privacy. That's how I see
Yes,
it now.
yes,
Uh,
privacy shield.
Speaking of lacks of personality, which you do not have, you are a very personal dude. But speaking of lacks of personality, Octopath Traveler main characters to me, awesome premises for the most part, but the actual execution is very whatever. So this is my opinion, clearly.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. And I can definitely see that. I find that some people just relate to the different characters differently, and some people really like one over the other. And yeah, I understand that. For me, let's say Honnet didn't really resonate with me, in part because the butchery of Old English slash
oh yeah,
Middle English combination really grated on me. I have too much of a background in Old English to be able to overlook that. But
yeah.
characters like Cyrus, I really liked in there. I thought really stood out to me in the cast. But I think, and this is one of the biggest critiques for the game, is that they were brought down because there just wasn't interaction between all the members of the cast. They weren't able to build upon each other like
Yes.
a lot more ensemble games like Trails of the Sky or the Tales of games tend to have ensemble casts that build on each other.
Yes.
And
The touchstone, I guess, example of that is Final Fantasy VI, for sure. Because like when this game was first announced, it was very much heavily marketed as a Final Fantasy VI again, and a lot of like more casual RPG goers or people who may have played Final Fantasy as a kid, who are now owners of a Switch, see that and they're like, oh, that is Final Fantasy VI. So I think that kind of almost like superficial. I don't know if it's marketing so much as it is just like the scope of the game, but I think that superficial observation is definitely like was really strong in how this game presented itself. And
yeah, and I think that impacted its reception, because a lot of the time when I hear people criticizing the game, it's kind of like they were expecting something different going in. And
yes,
I felt like I had a good grasp on what the game was going to be going in. And
same.
I enjoyed it for what it was. But I can understand if someone was expecting, I don't know, a more interconnected story that comes together in a big finale. I can really understand how that would disappoint them
Totally. And
when it
Lord
comes
Shmup,
to this
thank
one.
you. Lord Shmup says that Therian is his favorite character, or one of his favorites. And he complimented me because he's a sweetheart. But yeah, no, I think that's the biggest thing about this game is that if you know what to expect going in, and you are aware and completely inoculated to any pretenses that the game has, such as this is like the RPG that brings back retro RPGs, like that's kind of like what the game seems to posit itself as. If you're able
Hmm.
to sort of inoculate yourself from that, I feel like you get a lot more enjoyment out of this game. And I think one of the issues that I have with it as a whole is how derivative a lot of the set pieces are. A lot of the plot beats seem to be. It kind of just sort of seems like it's going through the motions and it doesn't quite know if it wants to be a retro throwback or a solid RPG. It just kind of doesn't really ever make up its mind. And I think that's even implicit in the pacing of the battle system, which I love the battle system in this game. I think it's great.
Hmm.
My only problem is that you can easily break it right in the beginning of the game. And there are some spoilers here. I should have mentioned this. It's full disclosure. But later in the game, like the only really difficult things I think in Octopath are the super bosses, which are they guard the super jobs, quote unquote, and then there's a true final boss that definitely does not fuck around. So those two
So you're not
things.
including the wolf boss in that,
Oh yeah, I
because
guess yeah. There's
that
that.
that boss, I hated that one. It was such a damage sponge and took so long to beat.
Yeah, I can see that being a problem. I think by the time I fought that, I was pretty stacked, so it was whatever.
Mm,
Um, and so yeah, like there's not the difficulty spikes in this game are very disjointed, and I think you
mhm,
know this is a common criticism you see of a lot of RPGs from people who don't know how to play RPGs well. Um, and that sounds really arrogant, but like no, I see this a lot. It's like almost like a game journalist thing where they're like, well, their difficulty spike is huge, and you can say that about fucking Final Fantasy VII, and it doesn't apply. You know, like just
mm,
because there are more difficult bosses than others doesn't mean that that there's a major difficulty spike. It just means that you were getting by somehow on not putting your effort into the battle system. That's the way I see it usually.
mm,
But with this game, yeah, I think like there just really isn't a lot there in the mid. No pun intended. Not a lot
mm,
of things in the mid game to really challenge you. And I guess the beginning is usually pretty easy as well, but kind of only know if you know what you're doing. I can see, you know, if you stumble out of the world and you start like going into the chapter 2 or 3 zones super early without getting any party members or without like kind of dinking around with the skill system and all that kind of stuff,
mm,
then I feel like you're going to have a little bit of a hard time for sure. But if you do put a little bit of effort into that, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. But I think what I'm getting with this is I think the battle system ends up being very underutilized for the most part because the break system is so busted and it allows you to sort of trivialize or I guess sort of circumvent a lot of mechanics in the game. And that's intentional, sure. But the problem I have with it is that you can this is an example here. You can grab the Scholar Shrine, which gives you Scholar or Cyrus's sub job really early on in the game. And you get two people who cast magic and you can literally kill like the hardest trash mobs in the game right away because you can break them so quickly with two onslaughts of magic. And I don't think I don't like that. You know, that's a little too busted. It's a little too easy to be that busted. How do you feel about
mm.
this, Rio?
I mean, I understand that, and there's the combat over time, especially when I was grinding up, just wasn't as engaging as it could have been, I feel. But I also think on the point of the game being broken can be broken pretty easily. It's sometimes I find it hard to find games that can't be broken pretty easily. People are very creative, and this is a multi-series thing. I hear that about Trails, I hear that about Fire Emblem, I hear that about Tales, Valkyria Chronicles, all of them, and some of them are I think are easier to understand how to break them.
For
But
sure.
yeah, it's for me, I feel like the Octopath Traveler system and all of that is a good baseline for them moving forward. And
Yes,
I think
I agree.
that's something I've really been
Hmm.
hoping to see at some point is what are they going to do? And I don't mean the mobile game, which
Yeah, that
I
doesn't
don't
count.
know
We don't
what's
talk
going
about
on with
that.
that.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, but they're definitely going to make a mainline entry. In fact, I don't know how credible it was, but I saw there was some leaked Square-Enix project list, and one of them said Project Traveler on it, and I didn't know
Mm.
if that meant a second console
You
game.
know what? Square Enix loves to do that too because you know that's what they did with the Evil East project and Fabula Nova Crystallis and all that stuff. But real quick before I address what you said, I'm gonna answer Lord Shmup's question here.
Mhm.
who said, "Can I just use one character and be okay, or do I need others in my party?" And absolutely, yes, you do need others in your party. You need every single person in this game in your party because, okay, a little bit of a spoiler. I won't get into I won't tell you exactly why, but there is at least one battle in the game where you will need to use all 8 members. So
Mhm.
consider
And
that.
that can be very, very bad if you have a very much preferred team and didn't trade up the other 4 to correspond with that, which is
That kind of
definitely
happened to me a
not
little bit.
a situation I relate to here. Definitely not.
So let me give you some tips here because I feel like I'm a mild authority on this game because I smash the shit out of it pretty early on. And yes, Lord Schmupp was calling me Your Excellency because yes, I am. I am indeed royalty.
Hmm.
But no, I'm kidding. But I will give you some tips, and I'll say that I'm a mid authority. Yes, definitely a mid core authority. Uh, the best thing I can suggest is you don't really have. It doesn't really take that long to get all the other characters, especially if you've done it before or if you've experienced their stories. So what you can do is just kind of like ping pong around the world, make a beeline toward each starting area, and once you grab all the characters, don't start your chapter 2s yet. Grab all the characters and then get all the shrines. And there are what those are there shrines in the world map. I do smoke a lot of mids. If you listen to my levels, like the mids are scooped because this is apparently metalcore. But anyway, if you stop at all the shrine areas, you can actually get sub jobs from them without actually fighting anything. Or if you do fight something, it'll be like 1 or 2 things. So that'll speed up things considerably. I would also recommend starting with Cyrus or getting Cyrus right away because Cyrus has a passive ability that lets you reduce the amount of random encounters that you have. So that is
that is definitely helpful.
yeah. He says, "I don't know if I skipped one. Is that possible, or can I go back instead?" No, you cannot. You cannot miss any characters in this game, at least not
Mhm.
permanently. I don't really think there's anything missable in this game, which is really nice, actually. I'm
Hmm.
sure there's like different ways you can go about doing side quests, which can influence the rewards. But for the most part, nothing is really missing. Can you speak more to that, Rio? Is there something I'm forgetting here?
Yeah, I don't think there is anything that's missable. I think one of the appealing parts of Octopath Traveler was that uh, it really was open to what you wanted to do. You could complete the chapters in any order, and you talked about people shouldn't play with only one character, but I know people who have done self-imposed challenges
Yeah,
where
I
they just
have.
take one character and try and do everything that they can with that one character.
Yeah,
But
I did it
yeah,
with Alphen, and it was very easy with Alphen
I
because Alphen is absolutely busted. Like I would say Alphen is the most busted character unless you go full Pokemon with Hanit and get all the best monsters.
man, Ulbrich can do huge amounts of damage,
Ulbrich
and
is good
there
too.
you can. Mhm.
Ulbrich is very good. There's no real bad characters in this game, because you can build them however you want.
For battle. We're talking about for battle
For
there.
bad. Oh yeah, yeah. Let me clarify that. Yeah, because there are bad characters written or plot wise or writing wise for sure. Yeah, I wanted to talk about like the plot first, but then people started asking about mechanics, so I like that.
Mhm.
We'll keep talking about mechanics before we start talking about the plot and the stories and how everything works or doesn't work. It doesn't really work. Uh,
Do we really need to talk about that? Let's just talk about like the gameplay and the music and the art, just the features that are standout for Octopath.
mhm. Okay, so you want to
Mhm.
keep a more positive tone. I
No,
see.
it is fine. However, the discussion goes
Right.
there, but I am always down to talk about the music and art, because I think that's the area they absolutely knocked it out of the park with.
Yeah. So when I first saw this game, I just want to give and maybe my experience kind of encapsulates a lot of what other people's is like. But when I first saw it, I was like, "Ooh, that looks kind of cool." And then I started to see, it had that sort of Saga Frontier approach where it was different stories, and I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." But then I started to sort of look at the world, and I didn't really like it. And then it got all this hype for this incredible amount of hype on forums and Reddit and Discord, and I kind of noped out a little bit. I played the demo then, and I wasn't super impressed. But then when that second demo came out, because they released two, and when that second demo came out, it was actually kind of cool because this developer, I really like how they do listen to fan feedback a lot. They did this with Bravely Default too.
Bravely, yeah.
And that's why they released two demos of it, and I really applaud that.
Absolutely.
So
More developers
nice.
should release demos in general. Just doing two is even better.
We need to go back to the time of demo discs, man. That doesn't need to happen.
I don't think we're going back to discs in general at any
We're
point.
going back to cassettes, where that's 8 tracks. It's just regressive completely.
Yes, it feels strange being in the generation that I actually remember cassettes happening, but it was so early that the transition to CDs and now to pretty much all digital has also happened during that time.
Yes, it happened very quickly, like my opinion of Octopath. So when I played that second demo, I was like, "Oh, all right, this game has potential." And so I was basically like, because I work freelance, and I was like, I'm not going to take any projects during this time. I'm just going to go ham on Octopath Traveler. And I did. I beat this game in like 2 days. I was super active on the Discord. I actually had a lot of fun with this. Like, a lot of people criticize that approach of binging a game or whatever, but I think it was kind of fun. It helped build a community. Everybody was talking. Everybody was active. Yeah, I just got to know life this game for 2.5 days, and it was sick. The only thing though is that maybe I don't know, like, it's hard to synthesize a lot of specific information when you're playing that much, but it's a game I feel like that you can do that with pretty easily. So I don't know. I feel like despite my issues with this game, I really do like how much it sort of engrossed me, and I had a really good experience outside of the game, that it definitely more positively influences my opinion of it. So when people shit on Octopath, I don't fully want to dump on it,
Yeah.
like almost like a wet fart instead of a full dump. And that is a disgusting analogy, but it had to be made. I'm sorry.
Great.
I'm 13 years old again. I'm watching Jackass. You talked about cassettes. It brought me back. I'm calling people bad names on Xbox Live, dude. It's just it's all downhill from here. But funny enough, the band Murder by Death, who are not a metal band, they released an album called The Other Shore that came out in the same couple days, in the same couple day time frame as Octopath. And there's a lot of melodica in that album, and there's a lot of melodica in Octopath Traveler's OST. So I had this strange conflated memory of just hearing melodica everywhere, like the river area, the Riverlands area. Yeah. Is that what it's called?
The Riverlands is definitely an area in the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of melodica there. So, Rio, what was your experience with this game? What was your personal little?
Well, so I think I first became aware of it during a Nintendo Direct at some point. I was watching it, and I really liked how it looked and sounded, and I thought the concept was cool, since I'd never played a game with kind of separate characters going out on adventures during that time. I I have played a lot of JRPGs, but it has mainly been, as I said earlier, ensemble cast games, or I guess you can't say ensemble cast for Ys until the later ones, but
Oh
like
yeah,
solo adventures.
yeah.
Mm,
Oh, that is a good call. Actually, they did become more ensemble
mm.
as time went on.
And so I saw that. I played the demo. I enjoyed the demo, although I was definitely happier with Primrose's section than Ulbricht's. Ulbricht's
Yes,
just felt like I'd seen it before and had done that before. Didn't have as much new to offer in gameplay or in story.
totally.
And I definitely kept Octopath in mind because it came out literally the day before my birthday. So whenever you get a piece of media releasing in that time frame, you're always aware of it. I had a book that released last year on my birthday, and I lotteried the rights to get me that book for a gift away to siblings and friends.
That's so that is some Your Excellency shit. I love that. 13 Sentinels came out on my birthday last
Mm,
year, because 2020 is
yeah,
last year, and so
2020
that was a
is
nice birthday
last
present.
year.
Yeah, is it though?
Yeah.
Are we just in the
Uh,
bonus round?
so 2020, because 2020 didn't really become 2020 for the first couple
That's
months,
true.
since
That is true.
there was still some normalcy in
Mhm.
there. There was stuff going on, but it was still somewhat normalcy. So I think they decided to take some of the first few months of 2021 and as well,
Yeah,
just to do a full year
exactly.
of
Yeah,
2020.
that's a big brain
But
realization, by the way.
yeah. But so I obviously got the game as soon as I could. I didn't wait for the following birthday date. But I had also just started a new job, and this is a problem that has happened multiple times where I start up work or I get back to work just when a big game comes out. It happened for
Oh
Fire Emblem
man,
Three Houses and
yeah,
Persona 5 Royal as well.
I feel
All
this.
really bad timing for me. But so I didn't actually manage to complete it until sometime in August. And and I think that slow approach, I don't know, it definitely impacted the way I viewed it, because uh, because the story was more disjointed than most games, I felt like I could jump back in, I think, a
Yeah,
lot easier
you kind of
than
can, I think, in a way.
for others. hmm And so it really suited me for that time. It's not exactly a pick up and play game, but it is still one that's pretty easy to get into once you've started it. And
For sure.
and there's a decent amount of stuff to do. If I didn't have the time to risk, I don't know, a long story beat in there, there was always some side quests and stuff that I could do on the side, and obviously grinding, because there was definitely fair amount that had to be done for that, just to get all the characters up.
Side quests, like the name of the series. But if I have a
Yes.
really shitty episode, it'll be a fetch quest. So, we have that going for. No, that's
Great.
interesting. I think the pick up and play thing is it's almost a selling point of Octopath, because, like you said,
Yeah.
it's not like there isn't a story. It's not like you can come back to it and not be lost a little bit. But as a whole, compared to like a more traditionally linear RPG, or even FF6, for example, it's easier to just come back later. And one of my friends Jake, I'm looking at you if you're watching this. He picked it up and he played it for a little bit and then kind of raged at it and said it was the hardest game he ever played, which is facetious, but like he definitely had some struggles with it. And I keep pushing him to come back to it. And I think that if he does come back to it, because after he quit it, he started playing a bunch of other RPGs, like Persona 5, I think, and a couple other things. And again, I'm putting your whole life story on the line here, buddy. But I feel like if he comes back to it now, he'll have an easier time. You know, the adjustment period isn't as extreme. And this game's subsystems benefit that, I think, in a way. With the way that you can grind out stuff.
I think in general, the choice of platform, it works so well for the Switch. And that was a really smart choice for them to release it first on Switch. I don't know how people feel about it on PC, since I know it released there, but obviously I'd gone and played it and wasn't going to double dip on that. I don't get paid enough for that.
Not yet, anyway. After this episode, man, the royalty checks coming right in, man. Well, hey, I didn't tell you this, but you're under an NDA, or not an NDA, but you signed a contract verbally that allows me to take 100% profits from this video. And boy, let me tell you, there are many profits.
hey, I just passed 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, so I can get some money now from that. Yeah,
dude, that's a lot.
It's great.
Hell yeah, congrats.
Yeah, I've been happy with that. But thank you. But yeah, I can now rake in all that ad money, and as you hear from every YouTuber, it's just going up and up. The creator share is just massive in there.
Definitely.
Definitely the way it's going.
You can cut that sarcasm with a butter knife, I think. Yeah.
Being sarcastic, perish the thought.
For sure. So I think Octopath does have a virtue of being a very good portable game, and I didn't play it on PC either. The only thing is because there's no real bad loading times. Nothing feels slow or clunky, which is really nice. And that's kind of the biggest things with Switch ports that you see, where big loading times, FPS drops. There are some FPS drops in combat, but it kind of fits the style. You know?
Because they went for the retro style, it doesn't. I don't think it impacts it as much as, say, I keep seeing people comparing the ports for PS4 and Switch for Persona 5 Strikers, which is coming up, which I am definitely not getting on Switch.
No,
because the loading times and the dropped frames doesn't seem too bad, but it's definitely noticeable. And in a game with that style, it stands out.
100%. Yeah, because it's all action, for sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of style, let's talk a little bit about the style of this game, because I love the sprites. I love the design, the quirkiness of them. They may be a little bit derivative, but I do really like them. They have a lot of character. What I don't really like is I don't like the pop-up book aesthetic. And I know this is kind of a hot take. I just feel like it doesn't really fit the world that much. Because the world is definitely... It tries to be very kind of serious. It tries to be that Square-Enix balance of serious and goofy. But the goofiness doesn't really bleed in too much. There's really good exceptions. Some of Tessa's story is nice, is a nice balance. But Ulbrich's, no, not really. I don't really think it works for Hanit's either. I don't know, man. I kind of wish that this game had just stuck to just flatness. You know? I don't know. However, the collector's edition has that pop-up book thing. I think the Ryan, who I was talking to yesterday, was talking about this. But it came with a pop-up book thing that looks really awesome. But as it works in the game, I don't know. How do you feel about this?
I feel like it's really hard for me to tell without seeing the alternative. Like, what would the game
Right.
look like if it didn't have the 2D, 3D thing that they talked about?
Hmm.
And I like that. I do get what you're saying about it, about the environment not necessarily fitting the tone of the game at times. And yeah, that definitely happens, and I think it definitely happens in Octopath as well. I think the environment, despite you talking about it being picture book esque, it it does embrace the serious side of things more than the goofy side. And maybe they could have gotten more of the goofy side, even with that environment, with, I don't know, maybe some more dynamic work on the sprites. And I really like the
Yes.
sprites as well, but the animation could have gotten there. I know there's ways to animate the characters to give them more more personality in just their reactions to
Right.
dialogue that's happening.
So let's compare this game to the developer was Acquire, correct? Is that who did this? I believe. I know they're owned by
Um,
Square-Enix or
it's the
contracted
same
with
developers as
Bravely.
Bravely Default. That's what I know.
I'm pretty sure it's Acquire. If anyone wants to fact check me, please do. But so I think what they did was they were like, okay, let's take the charm of Square's heyday RPGs like Chrono Trigger or FF6 or even Romancing Saga 3, which all had very expressive character sprites. Secret of Mana, even
Mhm.
to some extent. Um, they had very expressive character sprites. Like they were like the best in the game almost at the time. And I think that Octopath was kind of like, oh, let's try to capture that magic. We'll try to capture that magic with Octopath. And it doesn't really work super well. Because, like you said, the animation it feels a little jagged. It feels like they're trying to channel things. Best example of this I can think of. Think of the movie Breathless, right? Like that movie sort of pioneered this concept of like jump cuts. And a big part of that was because of logistics and time constraints and just overall inexperience as an editor. But it
Mhm.
pioneered a style in cinema that like was artsy and sort of hipster and um like it's supposed to be like urgent and direct, more realistic
Mhm.
almost. And then other directors tried to channel that, and it kind of came off as ham-fisted. And I feel like
Mhm.
that kind of dynamic is very similar with Octopath and its predecessor, 16-bit predecessors, because it tries to capitalize on this very specific feeling and specific tone with these animations, and it doesn't quite get there. And I'm talking in depth about this because I feel like that is indicative of a lot of elements of this game, a lot of sort of like revisionist nostalgia almost.
Mhm.
And compared to a game like Undertale, which does the same thing pretty much, but to maybe varying degrees of success.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think you brought up a really good point about saying you didn't see the alternative. You don't see it's hard to say without seeing the alternative. But I think this developer in general does a very strange thing with backgrounds, because I feel like this is
Mhm.
really evident in Bravely Default too, where the backgrounds are
Yes.
really pretty, but do they mesh well with the characters and how you interact with the world? I just don't like how it works. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I can't speak for Bravely all that much. I tried the demo for Default and for 2, and it did it just didn't work for me, which is another reason for demos, because now I didn't have to spend the money.
But is
Uh,
that what they want?
but
Don't they kind of want you to spend the money?
they do, but I think that demos in general, some people are going to get scared off with demos, but I think the energy it gives people playing it helps with word of mouth and
Yeah.
with getting more people invested into playing the game. So I think it's a net positive, even if I have examples where playing a demo turned me off of a game rather than made me want it more.
Yeah, I think the demo that they released for this game, the second demo where you can play
Mhm.
the first chapter of
The first
everyone.
chapter of every character.
That
Yeah.
is a wow, what a demo, man. I loved it. I put like 20 something hours into that demo. And that's
Mhm.
another reason why I was able to breeze through the game a little bit, because what I did was I did like I think you had what, 8 hours in the demo or something like that. You didn't have that much time. Maybe it was way less than that. So what I did was I played through each character's story individually just to see it. And then once I
Mm.
did that, I did like a golden route where I picked Cyrus, and then I picked Ophelia, and I ran through and I grabbed everybody and did everything I could, so this way when the full game came out, I had my whole party right there. I'm ready to go. So that shaved a good 10 hours off my time, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's good. Also, I also started with Ophelia for my actual playthrough of the game. So,
Ophelia's great, man. And
mhm.
someone in the chat says, speaking on demos, I wish they would have had a demo for Xenoblade Chronicles because I feel like I wasted money on a copy. Ouch. Ouch.
So what does he mean by a copy?
Buying the game without having played it, I'm assuming. And so being
I
disappointed.
wasn't sure if it was like the definitive edition and had played the original and didn't want to,
Ah, I
and
see.
realized that it was basically the same.
Yeah. So elaborate. Elaborate here. Are you talking about like you just
Mhm.
disappointed in the game, or just the demo, or just the new version? So he says,
Mm.
"Yep, it's the combat system that I cannot vibe with," which I can understand that.
That's fair. Xenoblade has a distinct combat system, and I had to adjust to that because the definitive edition I played this past year because somehow it's 2021. Uh, is the first time I played Xenoblade, and I definitely had to get adjusted to the combat.
So I think the Octopath demo though
Mm.
was smart about this because it showed you combat, but didn't show you the full depth of the combat yet. It just hinted at it. So I think a
Yes.
lot of people probably played the demo and were like, "Oh, this game, I could do this game," and then they got the full game and they got into people's chapter 3s and they were just getting blasted.
Mm.
So it's like, because you could pretty much just fight spam your way through that demo and like be aight, but I
Mm.
don't know. Yeah, let's step back from the mechanics for a sec. Let's talk a little bit about the characters themselves, because we touched on the
Mhm.
sprites, and I think, and animation, so like the kind of the feel of these characters. And you mentioned Ulbrich, so we'll talk about Ulbrich for a second. I was not super happy with Ulbrich at first. I thought he was a very generic character, but sometimes that's not a bad thing. Sometimes you need that comfort food, right? And I think Ulbrich ended up being one of the better characters to me, at least story wise. Even though the first 2 chapters are meh, but as his story progresses, I think it gets more interesting. Did you feel that, or did you just always hate him?
So, what I think Ulbrich benefited from, and this was something I saw very distinctly between the characters, and in characters in general, is he had a very good villain foil
Yes.
to play off of. Ulbricht's villain was very good, and so he was able to. It helped Ulbricht as a character to have that to compete against, to challenge him, to discover all the stuff, because it felt like a journey in there. And I love Tressa, but the fact that she had basically no villain in there,
Yeah.
I think was a detriment to her character
I called her
ultimately.
Tessa, by the way, earlier, because that's how I'm a dumbass.
Yeah.
Oops.
It is pretty close, and Tessa is still a name, so
Yeah. Thank you
Mhm.
for rationalizing my
but
stupidity.
mhm. But they also have some strange stuff. I know Ophelia is spelled very strangely for anyone who has actually has the name Ophelia.
Right.
They took a look at that as like, I mean, yeah, but also no one spells it that way. That's the spelling of a parent who wants to name their kid the
Yeah.
same thing as another one, but wants it to be unique, which is an unfortunate reality in my family.
Oh
Not I
no.
avoided it. I avoided it, but I've got a cousin named Jackson with an X. So
No, I hate that
yes.
shit so much, man. Like changing the spelling of something does not make it unique. Okay, actually, I'm a victim of this. My mom wanted my middle name to be Andrew, spelled Andreau, and my dad was like, hard no.
Oh wow.
So I got it's like an Assyrian tradition to name everybody, with your middle name is like your grandfather's name. So I got pretty lucky with that. Like that extends to females as well. Female. I sound like a fucking Ferengi. But extends to women as well. And so it's like everybody has the same middle name to some extent. But yeah, I'm really lucky I didn't get Andrew with the AU, because that would have been horrendous. I don't want that. But yeah, Ophelia though, and I want to say Ophelia, not Ophelia, because of how fucked up that stupid spelling is. But Ophelia, her story did nothing for me. Is it considered like? I don't know.
It had potential, and
Yes.
yeah, I get that too. I really like Ophelia in general, just separated from the story as a character and as gameplay wise.
Yeah, she's good.
But I was definitely disappointed in the way the story unfolded there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree, because like if I were to like look at a bullet point list of all her plot beats, I would be like, oh, that sounds interesting. But in practice, not so interesting. But I will say one thing about Ophelia. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, because it's not rooted in her emotional journey as much as it
Yeah.
is her sister's, and we're not controlling her sister, so we don't get that,
Yes.
and that's a big issue.
Big issue with Tressa too. That's the biggest, because it's not her story so much as it is the dude's. I forgot his name.
Ali.
Yeah. So that sucks. But one thing about Ophelia, and jumping back to mechanics for a second, a little bit. If Lord Shmup is still here, this may help you out a little bit. If you're still looking for tips, so Ophelia is a magic user, and she's a healer by trade, apparently. And you see her, and you see what her abilities are and her stats, and like, okay, that's a healer. And yes, to some extent, it is. But the thing is that whenever you have a character who has really high magic, you can use that magic offensively too. So I think one trapping that a lot of people fall into with RPGs is they make their healer do too many things, right? So that's inefficient, because what ends up happening is that you build like a ton of magic on a character who you're not using that magic for. So rather than using Ophelia as a healer, maybe you want to use a character who is more of like a buffer, someone who doesn't really do that much damage. So this way, Ophelia can use her magic stat to nuke rather than waste it to heal, if that makes sense. It's kind of like an FF14 analogy of like how all healers in that game are basically DPS. You kind of have to look at it like that. Because if you can do so much damage with magic in this game that it seems silly to waste her huge potential for that, just to spam heals. So sorry, I just wanted to make that aside. Let's bring that to Tressa then, and let's talk about her story a little bit, or lack thereof. And it's not good. It's not good.
But pirate.
That's true. Cool premise. Again, cool premise, poor execution. And I think Tressa's story especially felt very rushed or tacked on. It kind of just
say certainly the end.
Yes.
certainly the end felt that way.
Definitely. I think she was the last character to be added, if I'm not mistaken, or the last character to be like fully developed. And it certainly feels that way. And I get what they were trying to do with her. They were trying to do the kind of Dragon Quest IV thing where, did you ever play Dragon Quest IV?
No.
There's
We talked about this. I haven't
That's
played
right.
Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy.
That's right. So Dragon Quest IV has this like brief. There's a character in it who's like a merchant, and he has very little combat in his scenario, and I feel like that's what they were trying to do with Tressa, except it's not really effective. It's non-committal, and I think that's the biggest problem with the scenarios in this game in general, is that they're very non-committal. They don't fully lean into a genre or style. Like when you play Therion's scenario, you're like, okay, so this is going to be heisty. I'm going to be stealing stuff, and it's going to be a different feel. The battles are going to be different, and that's not really true. Like
the
nothing.
Gameplay doesn't back it up.
Exactly, and that never happens in this game once because the pacing is incredibly sterile. Everything is like copy and pasted the same way. The pacing is always the same. You have your level 1 towns, and then your level 2 towns, and then your level 3 towns, and your level 4 towns, and they're all the same thing. It's almost like Western RPG pacing, which is I think is kind of what they were trying to do. Except it just feels kind of empty. It doesn't feel like it has personality. It feels like it's balanced for the sake of balance and without thought or like passion put into it. So that's my biggest problem with this game. It just feels so lifeless at times, if that makes sense. And I think you see that also with Therion's scenario, even though his scenario is like a little bit better, but it just had so much potential to be something interesting. I think the only scenario that really like that I felt something for was Primrose's.
I was gonna ask on that, but yes,
Primrose's starts out stronger than it finishes for sure, but hers is really engaging to me because it goes places, and it's very psychological. It reminds me a little bit of Jessica Jones, actually. Like the dynamic.
I think that's an appropriate comparison.
You see where I'm coming from?
Finally, you chose this piece of media I've actually watched.
Was Primrose your favorite as well?
I think it's hard to say on that. Because it's hard choosing between favorite story and favorite character are two different things. And I think Cyrus is my favorite character overall, but I don't think he wins on the story front. Although I think his story is actually pretty good in there. I think when it comes to story, the most cohesive ones were Cyrus, Primrose, Ulbrich, and then I don't know.
I like
Alphen
Alphonse.
And Bonnet, kind of. I think Alphen had a really strong middle.
Yeah,
but I don't think the start didn't grab me the way Primrose's did, certainly, and I don't think it finished as strong as it could have.
Well, what I liked about how the developers tried to do these stories was that not every story it follows a typical 3-act structure, or at least like a super contrived one. I liked how they kind of tried to innovate on some of the storytelling in it. Like Alphonse is a really good example. Cyrus is a really good example. But I don't really think it was super effective. I actually liked Alphonse more than I thought. And I played his chapter 1 and I didn't care at all. And then it started to get a little bit more interesting. I think it was a little convenient, a little too convenient, but it was pretty good. I liked Alphen's character a lot. I liked the the kind of pretentious doctor guy. And Cyrus too. Cyrus is like kind of a wholly unlikable character, you know, like, but he's got that charm. He's got that Hugo fact from E's charm, right?
Yeah, I can definitely get on board with that comparison.
So his was good, and I like how like Cyrus just fucks up constantly. Like his entire scenario is just him fucking up, which is cool. I think that's awesome.
Cyrus is an academic being thrown out into the actual world
Right.
and realizing that it doesn't actually work that way.
Right.
His
And he never
naivete
quite
is great. No, it doesn't. He gets by.
Right, and that's cool.
Because he's kind of charming. That's
And this is why I think this game, quote unquote, jumped the shark, which is my least favorite phrase. But it you know, like, it doesn't have. This is a common complaint. This is nothing new that you're gonna hear. But there's no real party interaction in this game, at least not in a way that feels meaningful or direct. So I think if there had been more of that, a scenario like Cyrus's or Ulbrich's or even Tress's could have been much more interesting. Because let's say you had a more grounded character in Cyrus's quest, being like, Cyrus, you're kind of turning down the pussy for no reason. You know, and like, you know, someone like Alphen or...
Well, I mean, that's probably not. I don't think it would be Alphen who would.
Yeah, that's true, because
that's more of a Therian.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. And it's not even that. It's just like everybody. And you know, you go through this like mental gymnastics to try to explain why he's such a dumbass, and you're like, is he asexual? And no, he's not, because he's kind of a weirdo and kind of like
he is oblivious as a standard JRPG protagonist.
Right. And everybody wants that booty. Like males, females, like whatever. Everyone wants Cyrus, and Cyrus is just he sucks. He sucks. He's just not horny enough. That's the okay. But
yeah. That's what Octopath was missing, the horniness.
Yeah. And I'm the kind of person, I don't like that shit at all in video games. I think romance plots 9 times out of 10 make me lose interest in the game. I don't like fan service. I don't like he saw me in my underwear bullshit. I zone out. I hate it.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think maybe a little horniness could have helped Cyrus just a little bit. Just a little bit.
I mean, he got through it all with his prudish nature, because they wanted him so bad they didn't care.
Right. And I like the innovation at the end where the story doesn't end after you beat the boss. There's like a little bit of extra stuff where you go through the library and so on, which is really cool. It was a nice touch. And then you get to like Hanit's scenario, and it's just a snooze fest. You know, it's a snooze fest. This is an example of why I think this game could have taken a lot more from Romancing Saga 3 or Saga Frontier, because despite each scenario, and again, I'm beating a dead horse, but despite each scenario trying to do something wholly unique, it never actually happens because it's non-committal. And Hanit's is a really good example because it's supposed to be a little bit more open. Hers is definitely supposed to be one of the more like free roaming scenarios, and it ends up just feeling like punctuated and weird and just non-effective, if that makes sense. Whereas, you know, you have a scenario like Riki's or even Blues in Saga Frontier, where it's more extensive. The journey feels more open. It's still guided. You're still guided. There's like a ribbon to guide you through the scenario, but it does feel open. And Hanit's never really does that. And also the Old English just throws me for a loop. I can't stand it.
Yeah, I couldn't get past that. I played it because I had to, but painful.
Right. Do we forget any one scenario? We talked about Therians just a little bit.
We
Ulbrich,
talked about Therians a little bit.
Tressa, Primrose.
We talked about Ophelia's.
Ophelia.
Yeah, I think we covered pretty much all the scenarios other than Theria, and we touched on that with the whole heist stealing things that didn't really fit with the way the gameplay happened.
Yes.
And I obviously they weren't going to do something extreme like make Haunted Section an open world
Right.
RPG and then I don't know, Therion's like a Dishonored style game.
Yeah. Oh no,
Not-
yeah.
not that.
I'm glad they didn't do, because that would have been an impossibility anyway. But like, there's still like a lot more that they could have done.
Yes.
To make even the gameplay itself just feel more congruent with the stories rather.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk then a little bit about this, and this is super spoiler territory. So go back if you don't want to hear it. Let's enter the final boss phase. Let's talk
I
about
don't want
this.
to enter that again.
How do you feel about the final boss, the secret final boss in this game?
I think it was there just for a common enemy at the end. There, I don't like scenarios where this was behind all the events that were happening. Sometimes it can work, but more often than not, I find it just devalues the stuff that came before. And so, yeah, and there just wasn't the connection. If you've got the looming presence, you gotta hint at it more. I feel like there were definitely hints, mostly on Cyrus's path, but that I just don't think there was enough to do that. I think it may have been an addition to maybe go against some of the criticism they anticipated, and it was a half-hearted effort.
Yeah, I agree. I think they originally planned to only leave vague supposition of a overarching Avengers style plot. And I think what happened was, once they started listening to feedback and they started gauging fan response, they're like, okay, we need to tie everything together in a very coherent, concise way. And it wasn't really that. But from a gameplay perspective, I appreciated the final boss being the super boss. You know, you don't really see that too often in RPGs where the final boss is the strongest enemy in the game. You see it in Saga.
Or at least the final boss the first time you face it.
Right.
I've seen ones where you go back to the final boss after completing, I don't know, the side quest you couldn't get to the first time, and then it's the super powerful boss.
Yeah, and I don't like having to do that, because it's like, my thing is like, once I beat the final boss the first time, I just like, that should be the end. And so like this final boss definitely felt like after you beat it, you're like, okay, the game is done. I have completed it. It's a good emotional journey in that sense. My only thing is, like you said, I don't think that there necessarily had to be something to tie everything together. I don't. I actually feel that cheapens the experience. It's because the whole point of the game seems to be, and this is probably why they didn't include party chat to begin with, and even when they did include it, it's very half-assed. But it's supposed to focus on the characters' individual journeys rather than the whole. It's very Gestalt in that way, and I think, man, I Gestalt theory and Jean-Luc Godard, two references in one episode. I'm either really stupid or I drank too much coffee. But they're I don't know. I just feel like it cheapens. Like, I'll bring this back to Saga Frontier. Saga Frontier doesn't have a golden route. It has a lot of like intermingling. There's a lot of like antagonist overlap for sure. Like some characters influence many other ones for sure. I just think that Octopath could have been a lot better in this. Why? I think the protagonists too are a little bit too separated. Like the choices or experience of one protagonist should have weighed heavily against some others. You know, like there should have been choices. There should have been some kind of player involvement. So I think
I think it was something they may have thought about with the whole noble versus rogue actions thing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But the only difference between them is just how the rogue actions are a chance and the noble ones just are a price, basically.
Right. Yes. And that definitely feels like again, it's trying to do like a Western RPG thing, but that it's just so half-assed. So, but that being said, how it relates to the final boss, the story ends up feeling shallow and sort of like the whole catharsis of the final boss and the mechanics of it and the difficulty of it sizzle out because of the grandiosity of it. You know, it's not a good grandiosity. It's not a to me, a good grandiosity is the final boss of FF6 or FF7. And I know you said you didn't play Final Fantasy, but I mean, I'm sure you know what Sephiroth looks like in the one-winged angel shit.
You mean Sephiroth or
Sephiroth?
Sephiroth.
Yeah. So yeah, when he just said like, you know, that's like the level of grandiosity that I think is like strong and effective. And yeah, you could like kind of giggle at it at the anime-ness or the overblownness of it, but there's
a reason that works. There's a reason anime keeps doing that.
Exactly. Yes. But I mean, there's something awesome to be said about getting fucking wrecked by that final boss because I didn't know what to expect, and you know, I once I beat the super bosses and got the super jobs and started to like level up my characters more or started to get the broken abilities, I started to steamroll everything, and everyone's chapter 4s were super easy because of that. And then when I get to the final boss, you fight all the chapter 4 bosses again, and they all got absolutely smoked. So I was like, yeah, this is going to be easy. And then it separates your party into two. And I'm like, well,
lure us in.
Well, there's like a difference of like 10 levels, so let me figure it out. And then I get to the first phase of it, and I'm like, okay, shit, I could kind of do this. It's a little hard because I have two characters in this party who suck. Maybe I should have planned. Okay, I did it. It took super long, and I beat the first phase. And then the second phase starts, and he wipes me in one turn. Like my whole party was bye. Bye. So I like that.
That very much parallels my experience with that.
And I had no idea what to expect because I don't think anybody had gotten to the final boss yet. And so, like, I didn't know, you know, it was a really good learning experience. So I went back, and what I don't like is the fact that you have to fight those 8 mooks again, because you should not have to sit through that. That is so stupid. We should
be able to save there. We should be able to save.
I get it, though, because it tried to do that masochistic Final Fantasy 3 shit of, like, you think you're ready, but you're not ready. And it's
designed to be a gauntlet, but the gauntlet before the final boss isn't challenging enough for that to really work.
Right.
It's just because you beat it the first time, you get crushed by the final boss, and then you have to go through and beat all the bosses again, and you've already done that, and it feels it's just time consuming.
It's the wrong kind of this is a hilarious day. It's the wrong kind of masochism. You know, like if it had been a dungeon, like you actually have to go through stuff and there's a feeling of progression, Maybe it's
Mhm.
new bosses that you haven't seen before. It just feels tacked on. It feels like they didn't really think that through and just threw it in to be masochistic. And
Mhm.
I don't like that's quote unquote, this is a loaded term. It's quote unquote artificial to me because like you said, the pacing of that makes no sense. These bosses get slapped. I don't even think I got hit on some of them because like all my shit was broken as hell. And then for the final boss to be like, well, everybody has to be this broken, and I wasn't quite ready for that. So I think there's better ways to teach the player that he or she is not ready for the final boss, and you could do it in a way that's masochistic. You can do it in a way that takes a lot of time, but I didn't really like the way that happened. I'm just gonna say it. I
Mhm.
didn't really like it.
Yeah. I would not blame anyone who just ended after all the chapter 4s. I
Yes,
don't think they're missing all that much.
I agree. I agree.
Unless they were like, "Oh, I swept through all of the chapter 4 bosses without getting hit. Come on, give me a challenge." Then I'm sending them right to that boss.
Right.
But
And I think that that's kind of why that they hid it behind a really obtuse side quest was for that reason to
Hmm.
say, hey, this is really only for people who really truly want to do this. You know, um, and I don't know, man. I just I'll bring it back to Romancing Saga. Romancing Saga, it's a similar thing where you get put in this. Without spoilers, I'll just talk about it like mechanically. You get once you do like all the scenarios or like the main scenario rather, you get locked in like a final dungeon area where you can refight the strongest bosses again or fight a true version of the final boss. And it feels kind of like the same like it definitely feels like a Octopath's version feels like a variation or derivation of that. It just doesn't work as well as Romancing Saga 3's. That's going to be
Hmm.
honest with you.
Well,
So,
have to take your word on that. But I imagine so.
speaking of final bosses, though, I think we've reached the final boss of our discussion. Um, Anything else that you want? I guess we didn't really talk about music, so let's try to condense that really fast. What's your favorite track from this game?
Oh god, that's so hard. I I this soundtrack is incredible. This is in the argument for my favorite video game soundtrack of all time.
Really
It
interesting.
is it is that good. I
Okay.
I, I was listening to the soundtrack before getting the game because and I don't do that with soundtracks. I really don't unless it's necessary for channel purposes, but that's
Right.
more recent stuff. But I was just blown away by everything, and I've searched out videos, and there are a lot of people in the music community who really agree with that. Also, Octopath was completely robbed on the whole uh, best soundtrack at the Game Awards,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah. So across the board, I think Yasunori Nishiki just absolutely crushed it. And I think it starts with the main theme there. I think the main theme absolutely embraces that sense of adventure in there.
Yeah. So I like the soundtrack a lot to this game, but I have trouble of, and maybe it's because there's not a lot of melody so much as there is like lushness to the songs. A lot of sort of big sweeping or orchestral moments, but there's not a lot of like super melodic, memorable parts to me. So
I
as
wouldn't agree with that. I think that it's a lot of that the melody is at the core of pretty much all the songs. There is a lot of that lushness, but it is lushness. It's growth on top of the
Mhm.
base that is the melody and that I keep humming anytime I'm playing the game in all of the parts.
I just don't
And
think
yeah,
it
they're
shines
they're
through as much. I mean, there's obvious exceptions. I don't think that's just a preference thing to me.
Hmm.
Again, none of the song I can't think of a song in there that I'm like, oh, I don't like that. But
Hmm.
it just doesn't really like peak with me. River of Life, I think is the name of the track, the Riverlands theme. That song, like,
I thought they were
ooh,
just called the Riverlands theme or stuff like that.
no,
But
that
yeah.
song is so good. Like, and it's really
Hmm.
simple. It's minimalistic, and I think it needed. I think that like I think that's the problem. There's not a lot of minimalism to the soundtrack. The minimalism in it is like elemental tones, a lot of like a lot of subtlety with like percussion. Ulbricht's areas music. I forgot what it's called. The Clifflands or something like that. Um,
Yeah, I think it's the No, Clifflands I feel like is Therians.
oh, maybe it
Um,
is. Oh,
I don't
those
remember.
are
It's
pretty
not a
similar. Those are similar, like melodic or musically, anyway. But there's like a lot of like timpani drums, rolls, kind of like just almost almost like crescendos, but not really. And there's a lot of that stuff, but there's not a lot of memorableness to those tracks. So they function well as like kind of a background music, but like as an actual like a video game song, it doesn't really super stick out to me that much. Um, but I would really love. I like this composer a lot. I'm not super familiar with their work. Uh,
He doesn't have a lot of this is the only game he's really composed the majority of the soundtrack for, or all the soundtrack for, but
okay.
he's been working with Square-Enix for a while, and one thing you may have heard, so he didn't do much on 7 Remake,
Oh
but
yeah.
he did do One Winged Angel.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty good arrangement. Also, like
Yes.
every Square composer ever worked on that, or Square Enix composer ever worked on that soundtrack, the
Mm.
remix
Yeah,
edition.
but they gave him a big task for that. They trusted
Right.
him to do that one, and
Mhm.
I think it's a good thing. I hope to hear more from him. I He
Same.
doesn't seem to have as much prolific work as say Yoko Shimomura, but
Mhm.
I'd love to hear more of his soundtracks in
I
the
do
future.
hear some Shimomura sort of tones to his music, especially with the strings, because there's a lot of
Mm.
string use. Um, One thing I have to say, I have to parallel. Um, what's his Nishiki? How do you say his name?
Yasunori Nishiki.
Nishiki. Okay. Um,
Mhm.
I see parallels between his stuff now and Soken's early stuff. So like
I
Soken's
That's not a name I recognize off the top of my head.
he did FF14 soundtrack. That's his like magnum opus right now.
Got
Um,
it.
and that
Yes,
soundtrack,
I've seen some recent ads for 14, so
it
I do have an idea of that soundtrack in my head at the moment.
nice. That soundtrack is all things. But like when I first heard Soken's work, I wasn't super invested. I didn't really like it that much. And then FF14 came out, and he started to expand his scope in a really interesting way. And he's now, to me, one of the better composers for RPGs out there. And
Hmm.
I see that kind of potential with Nishiki too. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, obviously I see that as well because he's already up there in my list of composers. So
right there you
I
go.
but yeah, so many good tracks there, and the way he constructed them, especially the battle themes, the somewhat personalized battle themes
I
where
did like
they
that.
have
Yeah,
a different intro based on their main theme. And then of course there's ones like Daughter of a Dark God, which is just absolutely epic.
so I
Yeah.
didn't. I think the final boss theme isn't that the final boss theme?
I
Daughter of
think
a-
I think that is.
Or the
And
first
then
phase?
there's another really good battle theme that's for all the bonus class bosses that
Oh, that's right.
is
Yeah.
also extremely good.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I guess that we are going over a little bit of time, but that's okay. I enjoy talking with you. Any other subjects that you'd like to broach really quickly before we wrap up here?
No, I think we've covered a lot of the game there, and at some point I gotta have lunch.
Do you though? Yeah. I mean, I think.
Yes, yes, food is good. Food is necessary.
All right. Well, I won't eat up any more of your time. See, I always say these things, and it was totally unintentional. Um, Rio, where can we find you again? You want to plug us?
Yeah, I can do the traditional plug. You can find me on YouTube as CommRio. I As I said earlier, I passed 1,000 subscribers. I've got a bunch of videos coming up. There's a lot of JRPG content on there. If people want to check that out. I even have an East 9 video coming soon for the East audience out there.
Hell yeah.
Uh, and then and then I'm also on Twitter, but I don't do as much there. So you can follow me there if you feel like it. But YouTube is the main area that you'll find me.
Awesome.
Mhm.
And as always, you can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/podcastjump. And we are on YouTube, Twitch. On Twitch, it's twitch.tv/JOIE jump and shoot. And Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, SoundCloud, all the things. Please check out Rio's channel because it is chock full of JRPG wholesomeness, and he's a great dude to talk to. So again, Rio, thanks, man, for being on here. I enjoyed this a lot. I
Yeah,
definitely enjoyed.
thank you for having me. It is very nice to be able to talk to someone about games, especially for this length of time. It's not something in these times,
Right.
that I'm able to do too often.
Well, if you ever want another long-winded discussion, I'm here. And thanks everybody
That
for
sounds
listening
good.
to our eightfold discussion. Rio, again, thanks again, man. And we will see you tomorrow with another side quest.